I was humiliated in court for bringing my donkey. They laughed, whispered, thought I was just another worthless hillbilly. But when the judge saw what I pulled from my folder, silence filled the room. The deed changed everything, and his expression changed instantly. Subscribe to our channel now and discover how a simple farmer showed that sometimes the one who laughs last isn't who they expected. The sun was rising slowly over the hills of rural Kentucky when Mr. Thomas Wilson awoke, as he had done every day for more than 4 decades. At 68, his body no longer had the vigor of yesteryear, but his brown eyes still carried the same determination that had brought him to this piece of land in the 1970s. He put on his cotton shirt, faded by time, adjusted his straw hat over his gray hair, and went out to the small corral where Stubborn, his faithful donkey, awaited his morning meal. "Good morning, partner. Another day of struggle ahead," he murmured to the animal while offering him a handful of fresh grass. Stubborn, with his large ears and expressive eyes, seemed to understand every word. He wasn't just any animal, he was companion, helper, and, in many moments of solitude, the only family Thomas had in that remote corner of Clearwater Springs. Thomas Wilson's small property wasn't impressive to occasional visitors. An adobe cottage with a thatched roof, a well-tended garden, some chickens scratching around the yard, and a cultivation area where he grew beans, corn, and cassava. By modern standards, it might seem backward, but to him, it was the embodiment of a lifetime of honest work. What no one imagined was that this modest land, nestled between verdant hills and a small crystalline stream, would become the center of a dispute that would shake not only Thomas's peaceful life, but the entire community of Clearwater Springs. It all began 3 months ago, when a convoy of imported cars raised dust on the dirt road leading to the property. Well-dressed men and women with clipboards and sophisticated equipment surveyed the surroundings, taking measurements and photographs. Thomas observed from a distance, not fully understanding what that activity meant. 2 days later, he received a visit from Richard Morgan, a man in his early 30s with an impeccable suit and calculated smile, who introduced himself as a representative of Horizon Group, one of the country's largest developers. "Mr. Wilson, we've come to make you an irresistible offer," Richard began, trying to maintain his balance in Italian shoes sinking into the moist earth of the yard. "Our company is developing the region's largest ecotourism resort, Crystal Waters Resort and Spa, and your property is located exactly where we plan to build the main complex." Stubborn, the donkey, approached curiously, causing Richard to step back with evident discomfort. Thomas noticed and smiled inwardly. "I'm not one to sell what's mine, son," he simply responded, stroking the animal's head. "This land here is my life." The young executive took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "I understand your sentimental attachment, but we're talking about a development that will bring progress to the entire region. Jobs, tourists, money circulating." He made a calculated pause before continuing. "We're willing to pay $50,000. It's a generous offer, considering that this place probably isn't worth even half that." Thomas's eyes hardened. He wasn't a man of many words, but he knew well when he was being belittled. "Thank you for your visit, but my answer is no." In the weeks that followed, the pressure increased. Richard returned with larger offers, always accompanied by increasingly less subtle arguments about how that area was being wasted in the hands of an outdated farmer. The visits became more frequent and less cordial, culminating with the arrival of a legal notification. Horizon Group claimed to be the legitimate owner of the area, based on purchase documents supposedly made with the former owner of the farm that surrounded Thomas's property. In the small town of Clearwater Springs, the case quickly became a topic in every conversation. The arrival of the resort was seen by many as an opportunity for development for the town that had faced years of economic stagnation. Mayor Edward Matthews, with an eye on the next election, was already announcing the project as the beginning of a new era of prosperity. Only a few voices rose in defense of Thomas, among them Julie Sanders, a teacher at the municipal school and granddaughter of one of the region's first inhabitants. Julie knew Thomas's story well. as her grandfather often mentioned how the man with the donkey had transformed an abandoned piece of land into a small but productive property. "This isn't right," she argued during a town council meeting. "Mr. Wilson has been on that land longer than many of us have been alive. How can they simply evict him like this?" But her words seemed to get lost among the dreams of progress and wealth that the resort promised. The hearing at the Clearwater Springs courthouse was scheduled for a Tuesday in May, and Thomas knew he would face not only Horizon Group's lawyers, but also the expectations of a town that already saw him as an obstacle to development. On the eve of the hearing, as night fell over his small property, Thomas sat on the porch of his house. Stubborn, as always, settled nearby, almost as if he understood the gravity of the moment. "Tomorrow will be difficult, old friend," he said to the animal, looking at the stars that were beginning to dot the sky. "They have money, they have education, they have everything we don't have, but there's one thing they'll never have." Thomas rose and entered the house, returning with a small wooden box. From inside, he removed an envelope yellowed by time, carefully preserved in a plastic bag. "The truth, Stubborn. They'll never have the truth on their side." Inside that envelope, kept for decades, was a document that could completely change the course of that story. An old certificate, notarized in 1978, proving that the land had been legally transferred to Thomas Wilson by the former owner as payment for years of service rendered. What nobody knew, not even Horizon Group's powerful lawyers, was that Thomas wasn't a squatter or trespasser. He was the legitimate owner of that piece of America, which, with sweat and dedication, he had transformed into his little paradise. The next day, wearing his only Sunday-best outfit and accompanied by his inseparable donkey, Thomas headed for town. The unusual image of the old farmer walking through the streets with a donkey by his side attracted stares and disguised laughter. Some took photos with cell phones, others made malicious comments, but he moved forward with the dignity that had always characterized him. Upon reaching the courthouse, the murmuring increased. Who was this old hillbilly who dared to bring an animal to a legal hearing? What they didn't know was that Thomas and Stubborn were about to star in one of the biggest turnarounds that small town had ever witnessed. The Clearwater Springs Courthouse, a modest two-story building on the central square, had never received as many people as on that Tuesday. The hearing room, with a capacity for 50 people, was overflowing with onlookers. On one side, the imposing legal team of Horizon Group, 3 impeccably suited lawyers, led by Dr. Charles Vernon, known throughout the state for never having lost a land dispute case. On the other side, alone, stood Thomas, with his calloused hands firmly holding his straw hat and the yellowed envelope. Outside, tied to a tree and protected from the sun, Stubborn waited patiently. The donkey's presence had caused such a commotion that Judge Michael Crawford, irritated by the uproar, had almost postponed the hearing. "If there is not order in this room, I will suspend the session immediately," the magistrate warned, banging his gavel forcefully on the bench. The room fell silent instantly. The session began with Dr. Vernon presenting the case. With a deep voice and perfect articulation, he described how Horizon Group had legally acquired all the lands of the former Bellevue farm, including the area irregularly occupied by Thomas Wilson. "Your Honor," said the lawyer, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses, "we are facing a classic case of invasion of private property. Mr. Thomas Wilson illegally occupies an area of approximately 8 acres that legitimately belongs to my client. We have presented all the deeds and records that prove this acquisition." Dr. Vernon made a strategic pause before continuing. "We understand that the defendant is an elderly person, and out of generosity, Horizon Group is willing to offer financial compensation of $100,000, well above the market value, so that he vacates the area without further trouble." The offer generated murmurs in the audience. For most of Clearwater Springs inhabitants, that amount represented a fortune. Richard Morgan, seated in the first row, smiled with satisfaction. Judge Crawford turned to Thomas. "Do you have any legal representation? An attorney?" "No, Your Honor," he replied with a firm voice. "I only have myself and the truth." Some discreet laughter echoed through the room. Even the judge seemed to contain a smile of condescension. "Very well, Mr. Wilson. What is your defense against the allegations presented?" Thomas rose slowly. Despite the looks of contempt and the snickers, he maintained the dignified posture that had always characterized him. "Your Honor, I'm not an educated man. I don't know the laws from books, but I know the law of life and truth. I've been on that land for more than 40 years. I arrived there when there was nothing but brush and stone. I built my house with these hands," he raised his calloused palms, "planted every tree, dug every ditch for the water to flow. I've known every inch of that ground like the lines of my own hand." Thomas paused, looking directly at Horizon Group's lawyer. "I'm not a trespasser. I've never taken anything from anyone. That land was given to me by the late Colonel Jeremy Daniels, owner of Bellevue Farm, in 1978, as payment for 10 years of work I did for him." The laughter was now more open. Dr. Vernon couldn't contain himself. "Your Honor, we're wasting the court's time with stories without any legal proof. If the defendant had a valid document, he certainly would have presented it before this hearing." Due was then that Thomas took from the inside pocket of his worn jacket the yellowed envelope. "I do have one, sir. I have this paper here that Colonel Daniels gave me, signed and stamped at the town notary." Dr. Vernon's expression subtly changed. Judge Crawford, now visibly interested, asked to examine the document. Carefully, Thomas handed the envelope to the court officer, who took it to the magistrate. Silence took over the room as the judge adjusted his glasses and carefully examined the contents. His furrowed brow slowly gave way to an expression of surprise. "This document is a public deed of donation, notarized at the Clearwater Springs Notary Office on March 15, 1978, where Mr. Jeremy Daniels, then owner of Bellevue Farm, transfers an area of 8.5 acres to Mr. Thomas Wilson as a form of payment for services rendered over 10 years. A murmur took over the room. Dr. Vernon, visibly uncomfortable, requested to examine the document. "Your Honor, this paper could be a forgery. We request time for a technical examination." "The document has an official seal and recognized signature of the notary at the time, Sebastian Peters," replied the judge. "In any case, it will be forwarded for verification of authenticity. Until proven otherwise, this document has a presumption of legality." The hearing was temporarily suspended. During the break, the buzz took over the courthouse. Thomas, ignoring the now curious looks, went out to see his companion Stubborn, offering him water and an affectionate pat. Julie Sanders, the teacher who had always defended his cause, approached with a broad smile. "Mr. Wilson, you're incredible. Why did you never mention this deed before?" "My dear, in my upbringing, a man is worth his word. This paper was always kept safe, but I never needed it until today. Nobody ever questioned my right to that land." When the hearing resumed, the atmosphere was completely different. Judge Crawford ordered that a glass of water be served to Thomas and asked that he be seated in a more comfortable chair. Horizon Group's lawyers were talking in raised tones with Richard, who seemed furious. "In view of the presentation of a document that, at first analysis, seems to legitimize Mr. Thomas Wilson's ownership of the disputed area, I order the suspension of any activity by Horizon Group on the land in question until the documentary examination is concluded and a complete verification of the property boundaries," declared the judge. Horizon Group's team tried to protest, but the magistrate was inflexible. The session was closed with the determination that a new hearing would be scheduled after the completion of the investigations. Upon leaving the courthouse, Thomas was surprised by a small crowd waiting for him. Many wanted to shake his hand. Others apologized for having doubted him. Mayor Edward Matthews, sensing the change in public mood, quickly approached for a photo, declaring his unconditional support for this illustrious citizen of our land. Journalists from the small local newspaper and even a regional broadcaster surrounded Thomas, who, with his characteristic simplicity, only declared, "I don't want trouble with anyone. I just want what is rightfully mine." As the news spread through the town, the mood among Horizon Group's employees was one of dismay. In the small inn where they were staying, Richard Morgan demanded explanations from his team. "How did you not find this document before? We did a complete survey of all the area's documentation. Sir, this record doesn't appear in the notary's digital system. It's probably prior to computerization, explained one of the assistants, trembling before his boss's fury. I want you to investigate everything about this old man and this document. There must be some flaw, some legal loophole. We're not going to lose a multi-million investment because of a hillbilly and his donkey. What Richard didn't know was that his conversation was being overheard by Mrs. Josephine Josie Miller, the inn's housekeeper and a distant cousin of Thomas. Discreetly, she recorded everything with her old cell phone. That recording would be just the beginning of a series of revelations that would shake the powerful Horizon Group to its foundations. Meanwhile, on his small property, Thomas fed his chickens with the same tranquility as always. Stubborn grazed calmly near the fence. Apparently nothing had changed in the routine of those two. But in town and behind the scenes of power, a storm was just beginning. The news of Thomas's preliminary victory spread rapidly throughout the surrounding area. In a few days, his story was crossing the county lines. A small farmer who, armed only with an old document and the truth, had faced a powerful developer. The narrative was irresistible to the media. Mary Allen, a reporter from a state newspaper, arrived in Clearwater Springs, determined to learn more about that peculiar character. When visiting Thomas's property, she was impressed with the organization of the small farm, the well-tended garden, and especially the relationship between the farmer and his donkey. Mr. Wilson, how do you feel about being a local celebrity now? Asked the journalist while watching the elderly man feed Stubborn with fresh carrots harvested from the garden. Miss, nothing has changed for me. I wake up with the sun, work my land, take care of my animals. The only difference is that now more people want to talk to me, he replied with a serene smile. What really matters is that Stubborn and I can continue our life in peace. The small town of Clearwater Springs would never be the same after that historic hearing. In the days that followed, a strange role reversal occurred. Thomas, previously seen as an obstacle to progress, became a symbol of resistance and integrity. Horizon Group, which presented itself as the bearer of development, came to be viewed with growing distrust. The recording made by Josie at the inn reached Julie Sanders' ears. The teacher, outraged by the tone and intentions revealed by Richard, Morgan immediately sought out Mary Allen, the reporter who was still in town. This is very serious, commented the journalist after hearing the audio. They are clearly willing to use questionable methods to get what they want. The material was included in an extensive report published in the state newspaper, which not only told Thomas's story, but also raised suspicions about Horizon Group's practices in other developments across the country. The article had national repercussions and reached social media, where thousands of people began to support the old man with the donkey, as Thomas was affectionately called. While public opinion mobilized, the technical examination of the document presented by Thomas confirmed its authenticity. Even more surprising was the discovery, in the physical archives of the notary office, of other documents from the same period that proved the legitimacy of the donation made by Colonel Daniels. Cornered, Horizon Group changed its strategy. In Satsimun, a press conference, Richard Morgan, now accompanied by the company's president, announced that in a gesture of goodwill and social responsibility, the project would be redesigned to preserve Thomas's property. It was never our intention to disrespect local traditions or harm any resident. Crystal Waters Resort has always been conceived as a project of integration with the community, he declared, with a smile that no longer convinced anyone. What they didn't expect was that the investigation initiated by Mary's report had already discovered much more. With the help of Julie and other longtime residents, the journalist gathered evidence that Horizon Group had acquired other properties in the region using documents of dubious origin. On a rainy afternoon in June, as Thomas and Stubborn were returning from a visit to the small-town market, they were surprised by an unusual delegation arriving at his property. A van from a national television station, 3 private cars, and even the official vehicle of the mayor's office were parked in front of his modest house. "What's going on here?" he asked Julie, who came to greet him with a radiant smile. "Mr. Wilson, you won't believe it. The story has gained national attention. People from all over the country want to meet you and Stubborn. And there's more. We discovered things about Horizon Group that will change everything. In the small room of the Adobe house, now crowded with visitors, Mary Allen explained her discoveries. Through documents obtained from notaries in other towns and testimonies from former employees, she had compiled a dossier that revealed a land-grabbing scheme operated by Horizon Group in various regions of the country. Their model is always the same, explained the reporter. They identify areas with tourism potential, often occupied by small farmers or traditional communities, forge property documents, and use their economic power to pressure the occupants to leave. Among those present was also District Attorney Claudia Mitchell, who had initiated a preliminary investigation after reading Mary's report. Mr. Wilson, your courageous actions may have unveiled one of the largest real estate fraud schemes in the state, explained the prosecutor. We have already requested the preventive freezing of all Horizon Group's assets while the investigations proceed. Thomas, seated in his old rocking chair with Stubborn faithfully settled at his feet, listened to everything with the serenity that had always characterized him. I never wanted to create problems for anyone, he finally said. I just wanted what is rightfully mine. This land isn't just a piece of ground to me, it's my life, my story. The simple yet profound words of the farmer moved everyone in the room. Mayor Edward Matthews, always attentive to political winds, seized the moment to announce that the town hall would create the Clearwater Springs Family Farm Protection Program, ensuring technical and legal assistance to small producers like Thomas. The story took on proportions that no one could have imagined. In the months that followed, Thomas's property became a visitation point for students, environmentalists, and tourists from all over the country. Stubborn the donkey, with his unique personality, won fans and even social media profiles administered by admirers. The investigation against Horizon Group advanced rapidly. Documents, testimonies, and technical evidence confirmed the criminal scheme. Richard Morgan and other executives were removed from their positions while the judicial process continued. One morning, 6 months after the fateful hearing, Thomas received an unexpected visit. Her simple car stopped in front of his house, and from it descended a gentleman of approximately 80 years, supported by an intricately carved wooden cane. Thomas Wilson. It's been a long time, my friend, exclaimed the visitor, with tears in his eyes. Thomas needed a few moments to recognize that face now marked by time, but when he did, he couldn't contain his emotion. Sebastian Peters. You're still alive. Sebastian Peters had been the notary who registered the donation of the land made by Colonel Daniels in 1978. After retiring, he moved to another state, but upon seeing Thomas's story in the news, he decided to return to Clearwater Springs to give his testimony. When I saw your story on television, I knew I needed to come. I remember perfectly that day at the notary office. Colonel Daniels made a point of officially registering the donation of the land to you. He always said you were the most honest and hard-working employee he ever had. Sebastian's testimony was the final piece needed to definitively end any questioning about the legitimacy of Thomas's property. In a new hearing, held with extensive media coverage, Judge Crawford not only confirmed the farmer's property rights, but also determined that Horizon Group pay compensation for moral damages. The news of the final victory spread quickly. That night, the residents of Clearwater Springs organized a party in the central square to celebrate. Colored paper lanterns illuminated the place, local musicians played traditional songs, and a large community table was set up with dishes prepared by each family in town. The highlight of the celebration was the arrival of Thomas riding on Stubborn, both adorned with colorful ribbons. The crowd made way, applauding enthusiastically. Children ran alongside the donkey, some offering carrots and apples to the famous animal. "Speech, speech," shouted the crowd, as Thomas, visibly moved, dismounted, with the help of Julie and old notary Sebastian. Never having been a man of many words, Thomas adjusted his hat, looked at all those smiling faces, and simply said, "Thank you for believing in the truth. This victory isn't just mine. It belongs to all who respect the land and live honestly." The simplicity and depth of those words silenced the crowd for a moment before a new wave of applause exploded in the square. In the weeks that followed, the story of Clearwater Springs took surprising turns. With the resort project definitively cancelled, the town needed to find new paths for its development. It was then that Julie Sanders had an idea that would forever transform the destiny of that small community. What if we created a rural tourism cooperative? We could show visitors the natural beauty of the region, traditional agriculture, local cuisine, sustainable tourism that values our culture. The idea was received with enthusiasm. Small farmers, artisans, traditional cooks, all united around the project. Thomas's property with its organic garden, traditional planting techniques, and, of course, the charismatic presence of Stubborn became one of the main attractions. A year after the fateful hearing, Clearwater Springs had transformed. Rural tourism brought new visitors, but in a sustainable and respectful way. Small family inns replaced the luxury resort project. Restaurants serving typical food prepared with local ingredients prospered. Traditional craft workshops were revitalized. And Thomas? He remained the same simple man, waking up with the sun to take care of his land. The only difference was that now, twice a week, he opened his doors to groups of tourists who wanted to learn about his traditional agricultural techniques and, of course, take photos with the famous Stubborn. One afternoon, while watching a group of children from the local school learning about organic planting in his garden, Thomas smiled at Julie, who was coordinating the visit. "You know, my dear, I never thought that hearing would change our lives so much. Not just mine, but the whole town's." Julie smiled back, watching the donkey that patiently allowed the children to pet him. "You and Stubborn taught us that sometimes we need to resist to preserve what's important, and that true wealth isn't in money, but in the value we give to our land and our traditions." In the distance, the sun was beginning to set behind the verdant hills of Clearwater Springs, casting a golden light over the small property where a simple man and his faithful donkey had unwittingly transformed the destiny of an entire community. And so on that once disputed land, what now flourished was not a luxury resort, but something much more valuable: respect for tradition, for the land, and for the truth. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Thomas and Stubborn has touched your hearts. This story of dignity, resistance, and triumph of truth reminds us that sometimes the courage of a simple man can change the destiny of an entire community. To continue your journey through equally moving American narratives, we've prepared a special playlist that can be accessed by clicking on the icon to the left. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave your like and share with friends and family who value our roots and traditions. Every day we bring unique stories that celebrate the soul of deep America. And you, have you ever faced a situation where you needed to defend what is rightfully yours? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the next one told here.